out, the one that's called Success Factors. I'm just going to share a different screen in so we can have our last bit of input before you get a chance to do some thinking and planning and designing. So let me do that. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. And we'll get started with the next part. Just going to move this over so I can see you this way. All right. So 25 minutes or so further inputs, and then we'll have the last hour to do some activities which I'll guide you through and show you some resources for you to do some continuing ongoing planning. This is an area of kind of significant passion for me, but also it's backed up by a lot of scientific evidence around the learning process and student learning. And so one of the things that we do know is that, you know, often what happens in technology programs is we go out and we make decisions about buying technology based on lots of different things, based on price, based on brand, based on, you know, functionality, based on lots of different reasons. And sometimes if we have like a full-on BYOD program, bring your own device program, sometimes that's left up to parents and kids to decide what they bring. And sometimes schools define or mandate, and sometimes it's completely open. There's lots of different areas of everything in between. And what we often see is this device dilemma. Now, knowing this is different for primary school and secondary school, as a matter of fact, you know, if I was working in a school, and I hope this isn't being recorded. Oh, that's right, it is. But if I was starting a school and I was thinking about primary school learning, I'd probably have iPads with the little kids too, shared devices. But once they get to sort of year 3 or something like that, I'd probably want to shift them to a computer because there's certain skills and things that they need to start building some muscle in around that time. And so we have this sort of dilemma of, I want a tablet, it's thin, it's light, it's easy on, but I need a sort of PC or a Mac to do some more grunty stuff. But actually with kids, there's also this third part here, which is I need a workbook. And as teachers, we know that there's a reason why we still have kids working with pen and paper. And so an area of great passion for me is the idea of having a stylus in a computer and what that actually allows for. Thank you, Linda, for your email. I'll be in touch. So what happens when you sort of get a stylus in a computer, and what does that do for the thinking process or for learning with students? And so when we think about sort of BYOD, you know, there's lots of different flavors of BYOD. I've got some old school devices here. This device here was actually the first type of computer with a pen we put into the hands of our kids in 2006. So that was, what, 15 years ago now. We transitioned from a traditional computer to a computer with a pen in it. And there was lots of reasons why we did that. But one of the main reasons is because we acknowledge that device actually matters. You know, the capability of that device actually makes a difference. And it's the same as the way that shoes matter. You know, if you've got the wrong shoes on for the wrong purpose, you're in trouble. You know, playing golf in stilettos is tough. Not that I know, but you know, walking in flippers is hard. It's about horses for courses, and it's about kinds of devices that matter for teachers and students. And so I'm going to get a little bit sciencey here and a little bit psychological, which is what I've got a degree in, so it probably excites me more than you. But one of the things we do know is that when students are learning stuff, or adults or anyone are learning stuff, if something is increasingly difficult, if difficulty goes up, people often want to switch to multimodal communication. It's the moment in a meeting when someone jumps up and says, "Can I just whiteboard that out? You know, I wish we had some butcher's paper to just jot this all down." It's that kind of stuff, which is what happens when difficulty increases in thinking. And so when we think in paper, or this is actually a physical photograph of a whiteboard, what we think is going to happen in the human brain is that ideas are going to pour out of our brain in a lovely sequential order that is all finalized. And the reality is that we see things more like this, and this occur when we see a true vision of the way the human brain works in thinking. And so when we get kids to brainstorm, for example, into a Word document or brainstorm into a notes page on an iPad or something, they actually struggle to fluently and creatively think the way that you would if you gave them pen and paper or a computer with a pen in it. And so where does all this stuff come from? Well, there's a book that was written called The Design of Future Educational Interfaces by Professor Sharon Oviatt. And it's a full-on sciencey book. It'll fall on your head if you're trying to read it at night. But it's got lots of studies in it and lots of research in it around this idea. And the premise of the book is, you know, given we know all of this stuff about all these fields of science up the top there in that red box, if we were to start again with an interface design for learning, what would it afford? And one of the things they talk about is that the role of writing stuff is still crucial. The role of a stylus in a computer or pen and paper is still crucial in the thinking process and in the learning process for kids. And we'll talk a bit more about that as we go. But let me show you some examples of the research that's being done in this space. So this one here is about note taking. And I realize that, you know, this is probably a secondary school part, this bit, because note taking is something that we certainly value as a skill as they progress through school, and certainly into tertiary and life beyond school. Note taking is a pretty important skill. They put lots of learners into a room, let's say it was a lecture theatre, and they created 3 experimental conditions. One group were told to take notes on a keyboard, so laptop keyboard or on-screen keyboard on their iPad, but just use a keyboard to get the notes down. The second group were told take notes with a pen and paper, okay, or it could have been a stylus on screen, but pen and paper. And the third group were told use a keyboard, it's fine, but don't take verbatim notes. Don't try and write down everything the teacher's saying. Because the science shows these days that people can type fast enough that they can almost transcribe exactly what is being said by the teacher. And so when you go into a university classroom these days and you see 95% of students sitting up behind a screen with a keyboard out, they're probably transcribing more than they're thinking. And so the evidence of that was in this study where they tried to assess, based on the 3 different ways of taking notes, how many facts could people recall and how could they apply those learnings to a different concept? So the conceptual application, they called it. And based on the way that they took notes, there was deficiencies or improvements in performance. So that's a really good question, Linda, about the PowerPoint slides. I'll come to that in a sec. So the factual recall, when students took notes on a keyboard only, their factual recall declined. And when they took notes on a keyboard only, their conceptual application also declined. When students were asked to use longhand, take notes, their factual recall improved, and so did their conceptual application. And I think one of the reasons for that is that you can't write as much down as you can type. That's one reason. So in other words, you have to work out how to summarize, how to synthesize, which are the important bits. You're probably digesting the slide more to work out which bits you should get down rather than taking everything get down and just sort of speed typing the stuff off the slide or transcribing the lecturer's voice. The other thing is that I don't know whether you've ever taken notes on a keyboard, but I'm not sure that any of us ever really stop to draw a diagram when you're taking notes on a keyboard. It's just too hard. And that implies that the diagram bits aren't very important for the note-taking process. And we know that sometimes diagrams speak 1,000 words. And so then what people will say is, oh no, but I use my mobile phone and I take photos of the slides. But if you're anything like me, you end up with photos of your slides that sit in your camera roll on your phone and they don't actually make it anywhere near where your notes are. And so this is an illustration of the fact that the way in which you are thinking whilst taking notes can actually make a difference to the amount of learning or understanding. And so it implies that there might be a misapplication of technology here, or maybe it's the wrong technology. Perhaps we shouldn't use technology in this instance, or if we do, it should be a certain type of technology to aid performance in note-taking. These are some notes that are written by a mate of mine back in the day. He was a medical student studying in Adelaide. And so what he would do is sit in his medical lectures and take like lots of handwritten notes. And then what he'd do is he'd get the slides from the lecturers, as you can see here with that ECG or whatever it is in the background. And he would put that onto his page, and then he would annotate over the top of it his understanding of what it all meant based on his notes and what he remembers from the lecture. I mean, it's pretty full on, right? Not every student does this stuff. But the interesting part about it in terms of the cognitive science, if I just grab a purple pen, is that all of these little markings that he's made, every little purple circle I'm doing on this, all of these in the science are called non-linguistic visuospatial markings. He's not writing screeds of language. He's just marking it up as his brain is processing and thinking about what these things mean. And what Professor Gordon Sanson from Monash University would say is that this is a perfect illustration up here of mixing high fidelity and low fidelity content together. I've got a screenshot from the teacher, the ECG in the background, and I can write and scribble all over it, which is what we used to do when we handed out handouts, right, in class. We would give the kids paper, ask them to stick it in their book, and then we could write on it and write beside it and annotate on it and all of those sorts of things. And so that's a really interesting process when we start to move to things like e-textbooks. There's no doubt in my mind that e-textbooks are actually better than sort of traditional textbooks because you can rotate things around and there's hyperlinks in there that launch you off to different things, and there's other little learning activities that can happen in there, simulations and stuff. But the challenge is that if your textbook is over here and your notes are completely separate over there, how do those two things ever meet together? And so, you know, I used to say to my students at Year 12 psychology, which is one of the subjects I taught, that when they entered my classroom, that you won't be selling Year 12 psychology textbook at the end of this year, because it'll be so scribbled on that you wouldn't get any, you know, any resale value on it, or maybe you'd get more. But the kids would be underlining, writing in stuff. I'd be doing an experiment with the kids and then not tell them what the experiment was about, get them to read 3 paragraphs and say, you tell me in the margins what that experiment was about. And the only reason I was doing it, because I understood a bit about the human brain, was to make sure that their textbook became a memory aid for when they were in the examination. And it had a combination of the semantic knowledge, which is semantic memories are one type of memory we have, and the episodic memories. The episodic memories are the activities of the experiment we ran in class and the memories of that in class linked together on one page so they could visualize it when they went to recall that knowledge later on in class. And so on an e-textbook, that's difficult. On a physical textbook, it might be possible. But if you've got a device that allows you to sort of screen capture stuff from an e-textbook, whack it in a digital note page, and then ink and annotate and record audio around it, you can kind of get the best of both of these worlds together. Now, the reason that that's important, this annotating on top of stuff while you think about it, is that the science shows that you get an increased depth of processing, increased reflection on the meaning of the content, and increased memory performance out of doing it, annotating on top of stuff while you think about it. And so this is another example of sort of backing that idea up. Let's assume we were all in a big room, and let's assume I could give you 2 pieces of paper, that one there and that one there, and they're 2 bits of A4 paper, and they've got some science data on it, and then I put up on the board a bit of a science problem that you've got to solve using those 2 bits of data. The only difference between the 2 groups in the room is that half of you aren't allowed to write on it while you think about it, and the other half of you are allowed to pick up your pen or pencils and start scribbling on it to your heart's content. The question is, does writing on it actually improve performance? And so it shows that the group who are allowed to mark up or annotate on top of something while they're learning performed almost 25% more in terms of higher solution correctness than those who weren't. Writing and marking up on top of stuff is really important. What the hell's this got to do with what we're talking about? So I taught in an environment for 12 years where every kid had a computer in front of them. And I reckon 95% or more of the stuff I gave them for learning, the curriculum resources, were digital. Go to this website, download this off the portal, here's a PDF, have a look at this PowerPoint slide, here's a Word doc template, digital. And we know, though, that when we're trying to get people to think about stuff, if they can write on it, they'll perform better. So how are they writing on the stuff that we give them digitally? And so that's where the value of this kind of technology comes into play. And so if you think about these subject areas here, mathematics and science, physics, chemistry, music theory, Japanese, Chinese art, there's something that is similar between all of these subjects. And the similarity between all of these subjects is that there is a symbolic language associated with all of them. Maybe not art so much, but certainly math, science, physics, chem, music theory, Japanese, Chinese, they're all symbolic languages, and they are ill-suited to doing on a traditional keyboard. And so we have to think about the role that technology plays in a mathematics classroom, which might be different to what it plays in an English classroom, or different what it plays in a humanities classroom. Or when you're doing literacy versus numeracy, there are different ways you can apply technology in those environments. For example, in mathematics, there's studies being done to show that the physical formation of the equations, you know, x squared plus 2 or 1 plus 1 equals 2 or whatever, the physical writing of those enhances performance in terms of people's ability to understand what the concepts mean and their subsequent performance in those areas of mathematics. So drill and practice in mathematics is actually a well-founded and well-researched part of learning. And it's difficult to do on certain types of computers and stuff, so we don't do them often. Or we do them on paper and separate these worlds. When we think about choosing computers and devices and stuff for kids at school, we sort of say to people, you should think about what kids actually do during the day. You know, and they do these things, and we could probably brainstorm 150 more if I set you free, of what kids actually do in class every day. You know, they read for understanding, they underline stuff, they write, they sketch, they draw, they code, they create products, they take photos, all of these things, right? And so there's research to suggest that everything that is in yellow there is better done with a pen or stylus than it is a keyboard. And so we need to think about what are the types of activities I'm getting my kids to do, and how does my technology allow my kids to do that more effectively? And so what about teachers? Because that's us, right? And so who was it? Linda asked a really interesting question in the chat there about, you know, what were the teachers presenting in those classes around note taking? Was it PowerPoint slides, PDFs? It's a really interesting question. It relates to this.
Sorry.
The first thing is, this was a study done by Monash University, and it was back in the day, right? 2000-ish is when they did this study. And they were looking at engagement of students going to lectures, and they were looking at the learning associated with actually attending a lecture. And they were sort of like, what's happening? You know, what's the trend like? And they found a pretty alarming trend downward, which was people are less engaged by going to a lecture, and they're actually learning less by going. Not learning less, I mean, they're learning something, but the gains aren't huge by going to the lecture. And to Linda's point, a couple of the things that changed in that time was teachers started teaching using Keynote and PowerPoint. And so one of the things that you lose if you use PowerPoint really badly, or you use Keynote really badly, which is the Apple version, is you lose storytelling. And you start to present a version of your thinking that I thought about last week or last year or 5 years ago, depending on how old your PowerPoints are. Whereas when I'm, you know, like right now, I'm sort of taking you on a journey of this graph using a pen and sort of building it up to sort of tell the story of what happened in this piece of research. Monash sort of thought, how can we get this to go back up? How do we improve engagement and understanding associated with going to lectures? And so they gave their lecturers a device with a pen in it, and they said to their lecturers, take 60% of the stuff off your PowerPoint slides and ink it in live. So your PowerPoint slides are beautiful, we know it. Get rid of 60% of it and ink it in live. And so what was the result of that? So they surveyed the students after this. 80 to 90% of the students said that they preferred the lectures when their teachers taught that way. 80% said that their focus was better when their teacher taught that way. And 85% said they understood more when their teachers taught that way. And I've been doing it a lot, right? I'm doing it right now. All I'm doing is circling on stuff and drawing your attention to certain elements of what it is I'm talking about. We use whiteboards in our classroom really, really well in education and in teaching. And we use it in such a way that you know, sometimes what we see in classrooms is that the projector, the computer projector, projects straight onto literally onto a whiteboard. And then it gives you the kind of thing that I've got here where you can project a slide and you could write on top of it with a whiteboard marker, right? And so some teachers love doing that because it's kind of that analog and digital mix. So the lesson here is that really for teachers, it makes a difference too. And we've sort of seen lots of examples of this in K-12, in higher education, some amazing schools like All Hallows in Queensland, the work that Stephen and the crew out there are doing around getting their students to learn using stylus and improving their feedback loops is pretty amazing. I wanted to show you just a couple of things. First thing is, you might be looking at this and going, how's he presenting this, right? This, I've just sort of brought the menus back on. This is OneNote. This is part of Office 365. Some of you will have used it, some of you won't have. But OneNote is kind of like just a big piece of paper. You can see I'm sort of moving that around. And all I've really done is just taken you on a journey from the top across around and down the bottom of different content. So what I've got here is kind of like a flexible canvas where I can write stuff and I can type stuff, and then we can sort of engage all this together. A couple of examples. One of the things linked to mathematics. This is a piece of paper here. You can see here, there's a dotted line around the outside here with a piece of paper. And the students have actually been writing and annotating and marking up. And there's a point in time here where I've realized as an educator that they might have the wrong idea, that they might be making a mistake. And so one of the things that I could do is I could grab in a YouTube video. So here's a YouTube page, and I could open up a video here. And as part of my feedback to the student,
these days, there is a lot to balance.
That's got an ad on it, but it doesn't matter. I can just grab that video and whack it onto my piece of paper. Now, what it will do is it will embed this video as a bit of feedback into my literal piece of paper, which references cognitive load theory I talked about before. The idea that the learning is happening in the same place as the feedback is occurring, as the same place as the remediation of the feedback is occurring, and it's all on one sort of digital canvas. And so the reason I share this with you is because I think it's important when setting a vision for what we're doing, which we'll be doing for the next hour or so, is to think about the possibilities of what technology makes possible. And so if I go back to my other slide here, sorry, my finger's getting clumsy. There we go. Just to finish this off, basically the idea that technology is not neutral is really important here. The choices that you make around setting up the environment of your technology is going to have positive or negative impacts on the way that you can use that technology in the classroom. And so what I talk about is this idea of having a no compromise device for uncompromised teaching and learning. And so this is one element of a whole school conversation. This is one element to think about in terms of creating that plan for your school of what you want to do moving forward. And yes, it's about leveraging the technology and the tools, and it might seem a little bit sort of far-fetched, but the reality is that the type of technology that you deploy into classrooms is going to make a significant difference to the performance of students in using this kind of technology. So let's jump now to you guys doing some thinking about and planning for your schools. I'll take any other questions too in the chat window. Let me just share my other screen back in. So let me go to where we're up to now. Hopefully you've got those things printed out, because let's sharpen the focus now on what's the next steps for you and giving you an opportunity to start creating a vision statement for technology in your school. And what we're going to do first is this continuation of this activity we started earlier. So you had some sticky notes, and the sticky notes had some positive signs on them, and they were things we're doing really, really well. And now's an opportunity to get the other color of sticky note, or to get some to get your same colored sticky notes out that you're going to be able to put a little minus sign on. And you've got an opportunity now. I'm going to give you 4 minutes to write one idea per sticky note. What are the areas that we could improve as a school around our technology deployment? We've got lots of sticky notes on your table about great stuff that's happening. Now's an opportunity to find where are the areas that we might be able to do a bit better. And so I'm going to set 4 minutes on the clock for you to do that. One idea per sticky note. And remember, if you've got only one color of sticky note, put a little minus sign on the top of each sticky note when you add something to it. So 4 minutes on the clock starts now. Where can we improve as a school around our technology deployment? Go for it. Sorry about that. Okay, so hopefully now what you've got, now if you've only got one color sticky note, put some little negative signs on the top of those because they're opportunities for us to work on. And so I'm going to give you another 4 minutes. And this 4 minutes is going to be about this time you putting this all together onto your map. So let me explain what that means. One of the files that you would have printed out at the start, and let me just bring it up on the slide here on the screen, has these elements of the education transformation framework printed out on the paper. And so if you've got that printed out, now's the time to have those on your table. And I saw that some people have those before, because it's now time for us to grab those, all of those sticky notes, and to overlay them across the top of the education transformation framework. And so you've got lots of sticky notes there with plus signs on them, lots of sticky notes there with negative signs on them, or you've got 2 different colors. And so if you have some similar ideas, because there's 2 or 3 of you working in a room together, sort of stack them near each other, on top of each other, but you've also got to put them onto the quadrant of the ETF that makes sense. So if you're doing a really great job around curriculum and assessment, you identified that, then stick it on the curriculum and assessment part. And if you need to work a little bit more on creating your hybrid learning platform, then stick it on the hybrid learning part. And so what it'll do is it will give you a visual, like an opportunity map of what are the areas that we might work on in planning towards in the rest of this workshop and beyond. So I'm going to set another 4 minutes on the clock, lay out your ETF pieces of paper, and organize those sticky notes on top of it. So let me just reset the clock. Go for it. This will provide you with an opportunity map. All right, so the idea here is that hopefully once you've got your sticky notes out, you might see some patterns emerging about what are the areas we're working really well in. Now, remember, this is an arbitrary framework at the start of the day for you. It's based by a lot of research. You can have a look at the websites to find a bit more. But these are the critical conversations that school-wide or system-wide leaders have and get right when they really do see great things happening with technology in their schools or systems. And so hopefully what you can see emerging, and all you need to do really is take some photos of those bits of paper if you've got sticky notes now aligned, is hopefully what you can see emerging is some areas of which you can emphasize your strategy. What do I need to work on more? Where are some gaps here that we haven't thought about? What are some things we're really doing well and we should celebrate with our community? So in terms of thinking about this whole school change and these conversations, technology transformation is not just about one thing, which is what computers are we going to buy for kids, and what kind of are we going to use Teams, or are we going to use Google, or are we going to use whatever. There's so much more to it, and so hopefully what this has allowed you to do is think about what are the positive things and what are the things that we might be able to focus on moving forward. So let me jump to the next little activity, and we're sort of scaffolding you down to get some actionable vision statement or some actionable things you might be able to work on. The opportunity map is really just about where do we notice the gaps, where are we doing really well, what we need to work on. And so for the next 20 minutes, we're going to do an activity to go down one step deeper on that. And this involves the third document that I've put into, that I asked you to print out this morning. So you got emailed too, but unfortunately I've changed this up and I've added this third one in just to be annoying. But if you go to the aka.ms/STP leaders, you will find a document that is about 10 pages long, and it's called the Success Factors Activity. And so I'm going to give you enough time to sort of digest what is on these pages briefly. But I just want to explain the concept of what it is. This is a way to think about, if I just circle or put a square around these 2 pages here. So one of the elements or conversations you might have in your community, and obviously you'd focus on areas where you need to look at based on your analysis, is if you want to focus on educator, leader, and IT professional development, then you might choose these 2 pages to focus on. Or if you wanted to work on strategic planning and so on and so forth, then maybe it's those 2 pages you could work on. But the idea is, the way this is structured is there's a bit of a blurb, a bit of information at the top of it. It's called Success Factors Activity. Then there's an opportunity for you down here to have a bit of a tick and flick and look at which of these elements of the subparts of this might be really important for us. And it won't be all of them. It might be that, hey, we got to focus on educator, or maybe it's just educator PDs, what was highlighted by our opportunity map. How are we doing PD? Could we make that stronger? Find some of the things that are in this tick box that you want to focus on. The second page of it here allows you to do a little bit of an assessment, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And it might be just to go across and read what those things are and circle about where we are at the moment. And then think about, down the bottom, what are the actionable things that we could do to shift the dial on this? So if you're talking about educator PD, for example, there's a lot of evidence around, professional learning communities as the vehicle for professional learning, which is short, sharp, 6-week engagements with multiple teachers working together on a problem of practice that they're going to have a crack at trying to solve, implement in their classroom, conduct a little bit of, get some data, did it work, did it not work, come back, reflect, and then iterate. And so these professional learning communities might be one of the things that you say, hey, we should probably look at doing some of those around our technology or to inform our technology rollout. So the job is this for 20 minutes. This document has, I think it's 5 different topics, and I haven't got all the pages screenshot there, but you can have a look at it. There's 5 different topics that you could focus on. Choose one of them, or maybe 2 if you find you're going fast. And you're going to do this. I'll leave this on the screen. You're going to tick the areas up here, which are appropriate to what you want to work on. You're going to do the assessment, which is just circling on this part of the document here. How are we going at the moment? Are we a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4? And it will be, varied depending on what you tick in the first box. And most importantly, down in the bottom section, what are the next steps? What are the conversations we need to have? Who do we need to have these conversations with? What do we need to design? What do I need to do more research about? What are the actionable steps that I am going to do if I want to improve, for example, educator PD around ICT in our school? And so you're going to choose to do one of those in 20 minutes as a group, or you might choose to do 2 of those in 20 minutes. I don't think you'll get much further than that, especially if you have a good think about creating those actionable steps, next steps. So with that, I am going to shut up for 20 minutes. I'll set a timer. The documents are located at STP/STP leaders, and it's called Success Factors Activity, and it's right down the bottom of your folder. So it looks like, if I can show you, if you go to aka.ms/STP leaders, it's this bottom one here. And that's the document which will have all of these things laid out for it. You could do this on your computer and just highlight stuff if you want, or you can print it out and work on that. But what we're doing is opportunity map. What are the key conversations we need to have as a school? Where are we going really well? What might we need to focus on? We're going down a level now to look at, hey, how are we going within one of the things I care about that we want to focus on? And then we're going to go one step deeper and talk about how would we want to describe our technology program in terms of learning and teaching, and how might we start to create a vision statement for it. So 20 minutes to work on this success factors activity now. I shall go on mute and set a timer.
Strongly. I also think within that space, Kelly used the term the transformative power of education.
Okay. Move my timer out of the way. So, hopefully we've got from our opportunity map, getting down to some granular things. Hopefully they're a stimulus for thinking. Those sheets, or at least one of them, resonated with an area that you want to focus on, and give you some ideas of what the sub parts of that might look like in terms of some conversation starters with staff or with your school community, or with your immediate ICT planning team, and it gives you a few inputs for some discussion. The next thing, which involves one of the other handouts that that I gave you, this activity is going to be in two parts, so I'll sort of guide you through. This is the document that looks like this one. It looks like this one here. It's got 2 pages in it. It's from that same folder, and one page is, you know, crafting a statement, and the other page is creating some SMART goals. So the document is called ETF SMART Goals, and that's the one we're going to be working on for the next little while. Now, in order to get to a point where we can create some sort of statement around what we want our technology to you know, do for us, what's the vision for what our technology can do for us, we need to sort of break it down into a couple of steps to try and create that. And so here's the 2 steps that we're going to use. The first one, which is this one here, is if you could describe what you think a successful technology strategy looks like in your school, what are some words or phrases that you might use to describe that? So would it be consistent across classrooms? Would it be embedded in teacher practice? Would it be reliable so that teachers could trust it? Would it be linked to teaching goals? Would it be linked to our strategic goals as a school? Would it be aligned to our curriculum skills map that we've got for kids? Is it targeted around, you know, a certain type of literacy or numeracy or whatever you're focusing on at your school? So what are some key words or phrases first? So you're not creating full sentences or anything like that. Just what are some key words or phrases that when you cast your mind forward, you're like, technology in our school should be what? And it might be one word, it might be multiple words in a phrase. But I'm going to put 4 minutes on the clock to start thinking about some actual words which describe what's in your mind's eye about a successful implementation of technology in your environment. So 4 minutes, individual words or phrases, write them down, work on them as a group, whatever you like. 4 minutes, go. Okay, hopefully you've got some words or phrases written down there that might describe what successful technology environment in your school might look like. And hopefully it's linked to things that you care about, not only in terms of your opportunity map of the conversations you might need to have, but also linked to your strategic goals as a school, your curriculum goals, your pedagogy goals, whatever it is you're following in terms of educational theory, for example. You might be working on the work of Marzano or whoever else. So link it to all of those things, because the technology should only ever be there to drive the things that you have got in your annual implementation plan, your 3-year plan, your school vision. So the next part of this activity is down the bottom here. And that's to start putting those phrases or words into some kind of a statement. And where you can do that is here on the first part of that worksheet. It doesn't really matter, you could do it on a piece of paper. But when we look at what a vision statement is, and this is not a whole vision for your school, it's a vision for your technology piece, is it needs to be actionable in 5 years, written in present tense, directional, descriptive, and actionable. So have a think about how you might turn all of those phrases or words you've got yourself, or all of those phrases and words you've got as a team, into some kind of a statement. And a sentence starter is often useful. You don't have to use it, but a sentence starter is often useful in this area. And so you could start with, at our school, technology will, because this is just the technology bit. But obviously then you're going to weave in all of the things that you spoke about, or the most important things. You might have a discussion. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. So you might have enough time to sort of discuss all your different ideas together as a team, work out which ones are the top 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 that we want to include in here somehow, and then come up with some sort of a statement on that piece of paper or somewhere else that is a distillation of what you think your goals are in terms of a vision statement around technology. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to give you 10 minutes on the clock to take all of those words and phrases and distill them now into a statement of intent, a vision statement for your technology deployment. So I shall turn myself on mute and give you 10 minutes to come up with that statement. We are going to get some people to share some too. So we've got one more step after this, and then we'll get some people to share some ideas. Over to you, 9 minutes and 40 seconds. Okay, so one last step to do, and that is that we've now come up with some phrases or words to describe what we think our vision could look like. Hopefully now we've structured that into some sort of semblance of a statement, and it might still need some refining, or perhaps this isn't the time where you finish this process, but you get others involved to try and work out if that's what you actually want to do as a school and consult others. But the last thing is to the second page of that same document looks like this on the right hand side. And it's about where we actually think about, okay, given everything we've experienced today, given the whole education transformation framework, these are the critical conversations that we see make a difference, and that are consistently considered by schools and systems that are doing great stuff. So we've talked about a bit about some of those today. Some of them will still be fairly foreign to you, but they are sort of things that you can have a look at under the aka.ms//ETF to learn a little bit more about them. The four main categories are on this right-hand side here, which is the second page of that document you've been working on, the one you printed out that was emailed to you last week. And so it's an opportunity now to create some SMART goals, which is a specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely goal of what are we going to do to meet our vision. And so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes now because we need to wrap up, but I would think this is probably a couple of hours worth of work. This is probably where either you guys as a leadership team, or whether you bring people back together once the teachers have been off and done their thing and everyone's been out to their different elements, comes back together and actually defines what it is that we need to do to meet our goals, to reach that vision statement for our technology in our school. Because this could be quite an extensive list, or it could be a list that sparks some debate. You know, whether we need to focus on that first or that second. And there might be things like, how do we measure it? You know, what are the metrics? How are we going to measure that we've been successful there? Or you might actually want to add to this and talk about timings. You know, when is this likely to best happen? What sort of time frame at which are we trying to achieve these goals under these categories? Of course, you don't have to use a template like this if you want, but let me just give you a couple of minutes to have a go at that, and then I'm going to come back and just share a couple of resources with you, and then we are finished for the day. So I'll set the clock for 2 minutes to get you started, and then we will wrap up after that, and we'll be done probably just a couple of minutes late. Okay, so as I say, that document there, or that list of things that you come up with around your SMART goals, are kind of the actionable items that have been distilled down from all of these things that you could be talking about to the ones where we're maybe not doing so well or we want to focus on, or the ones that we think are really going to lead to success for us, right down into some statements of what that might look like and a vision statement ultimately, and then down into what should we do to actually get there. Now, they're organized via leadership and policy and teaching and learning as per the ETF, but that doesn't really matter. It's about focusing on what do we need to do as a school, what are the tangible outcomes that we could achieve, who do we need to leverage to do it, to bring those things together. So hopefully you've got a bit of a sense of heading towards that idea of a vision for learning through technology at your school. And hopefully it's the start of a conversation with a strategic group of yours. And as I say, I would recommend that you bring all of the people who've been involved in the different elements of this program together to co-construct what this looks like. Because although we touched a little bit on some technology stuff today, your teachers will do a much more deep dive into that and so what's possible. And so there'll be opportunities that come out of that as well. We were going to do some sharing, but we're out of time. One resource for you, we have free professional development for teachers called education.microsoft.com. It's the Microsoft Educator Center. And there are hundreds and hundreds of hundreds and hundreds of courses on there which allow teachers to take free PD and get badged and certified in using some of this stuff for teaching and learning, written in teacher voice. So lots of resources in there which your teachers will be put across. And last but not least, the resources for today's workshop will be located at the same link. Now, I've put a folder there for saying, for the 4th of March. There's nothing in it yet because we haven't finished. I'll package up the slides for you. The recording will be in there in 2 parts because there's 2 parts of this recording. So I'll put them in the 4th of March folder under that STP leaders. If you want to listen to the recording or you want to go back over something or you want access to the resources, they're all there. The Education Transformation Framework link is there. The Hybrid Learning Paper link is there. The free teacher training I just spoke about. And one thing we didn't get to, but your teachers will experience, is the bottom one there, which is an inclusive classroom parent kit for schools to run workshops around accessibility for parents, which we know is a big area that some of your teachers will be focusing on. So with that, thank you very much. Hopefully you've got something out of the last 3.5 hours that we've been together. Hopefully you've got a bit more of an understanding of what's possible and a bit more of an action plan of what you might do next. And we thank you for being part of it and look forward to running all the other sessions with the members of your school community to help you achieve. So thank you so much. And I'll hang around for a second, take any questions in the chat. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.